We're learning Likkutei Sichot, volume 2, Pinchas, and section 6, page 51. One of the innovations or new things in Pinchas is the order in which the inheritance of the land was determined. Which
I've never understood clearly.
Yeah. Okay, talk about it in a second. עניין הקורבנות וכן עניין ספירה בני ישראל מופיעים גם בפרשיות אחרות בהרחבה. Why do you say this is an innovation? Because the korbanos we have in Amor also. All the sacrifices we have in Amor, we have in other places as well. Counting the children of the Israelites, that's also something that appears in other parshas. אבל סדרי נחלה בכלל וסדרי נחלה בארץ ישראל בפרט מפורטים בפרשת פנחס. But the whole mitzvah of inheritance, how that works legally, and particularly the inheritance of the land of Israel, they are detailed in our parsha. סדרי ההתנחלות בארץ ישראל נקבעו על פי גורל. So there's an interesting thing that the inheritance of the land is determined also by a raffle.
A lottery.
A lottery, raffle.
That means exactly the same.
What's the difference?
A raffle is where you pay so much money and you get a prize or something or whatever. Lottery is like, it's...
Well, they're neither, because in a lottery nobody does what was done there. So we'll see in a moment. It's called the goral. That's really its name. A goral is an act of fate. Really, that's what it is.
Okay.
So, the pasuk says that the land should be divided by the goral, by this random event, as it were. בגמרא ובמדרש מוסבר שהם נקבעו על פי הגורל וגם על פי האורים ותומים. The Gemara and the Medrash say that it wasn't just the goral, it wasn't just this bin into which they inserted pieces of paper that had the names of the lots of the land and pieces of paper that had the names of the tribes, but rather that this was also done by the Urim and Tumim, by the Choshen. יש לכאורה להבין, כיוון שהסדר של חלוקת ארץ ישראל בגשמיות הוא משום שכך סדר חלוקת ארץ ישראל ברוחניות. הרי פירוש הדבר שסדר החלוקה בעבודת השם הוא על פי הגורל, והרי סדרי העבודה צריכים להיות על פי שכל, ולא על פי הגורל שהוא למעלה מטעם ודעת. If the division of the land of Israel in practice, in its physical entity, its physical matter was divided because, or in a way, that reflected how it's divided above. But why? Because we're saying, and this is a very important statement, that every tribe received exactly the parcel of land that was most fitting for it spiritually, not just physically. We can see this with Yerushalayim. We can see this with what part Yehuda received. You can see this with the fact that Zvulun was probably the most conspicuous of them all, was fitting to be spiritually. There were people, even though they had never seen water on the face of it, but they were people that were fitted to be seafarers. So they had to receive a part of the land that was related to their spiritual qualities. So you see this in, actually have a friend.
That's not sichah. That's ruchnius.
But it has some kind of, so you can go to a psychologist and he says, you, mister, should be working in such and such a field. That's not physical. It's not because you have big hands. Because spiritually, this is what you're adept at. This is what you'll find your calling in. I have a friend who, years ago, he never published it. It was a work of art. He wrote something like a 1,000-page book on the affinity between the tribes and their parcels of land in the land of Israel. Now, the reason we know that it's this way, and he's going to say this in a second, is because the Torah also tells us which parcel should be given to which tribe. It's not a big secret. It's a mitzvah, in fact. The Torah in Matos Maseh, in Matos especially, is going to tell us, I think it's a Matos, either one of them, is going to tell us exactly which part of the land should go to which tribe. And you could say that was after the Goral, but it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like this was already known, and this was reflecting something that already existed. Okay, so if that is the case, so the affinity between the tribe and the parcel of the land should be logical. There should be some reason to it. To come and do a lottery, to come and do a goral, something that's above reason, above tam v'dat, in order to divide it up, that makes no sense. נכון, אמנם שיסוד העבודה הוא דווקא קבלת toil, אך הוא יסוד העבודה בלבד, ואילו ראשית העבודה, כשיש לברר כיצד לעשות, מה מותר ומה אסור, צריכה להיות על פי התורה. מוכרח לשם כך שכל והשגה. He says, it's true that the beginning, the foundation of serving God is to be willing to receive the yoke of heaven. And receiving the yoke of heaven is an act that is above reason. You know? But that's only the beginning, that's only the foundation. Afterwards, to know what to do, you have to use reason. כיצד איפה נאמר שהחלוקה, כלומר הבירור והסיווג של העבודה מעשיתי על פי הגורל. So how is it possible that this toil, this service of God, which was dividing up the land of Israel to the tribes, could be done by a goral, by this random event? יתר על כן, בלתי מובן לנאמר, אך בגורל יחלק את הארץ. What's further difficult to understand is why does the word that starts this mitzvah of doing the goral, why does that word ach, only? Barei ach u'mi'ut, meaning only through goral can you divide up the land. Barei ach u'mi'ut, ופירוש הדבר שהחלוקה צריכה להיות רק על פי גורל, ולכאורה צריכה להיות רק על פי תעבודה. And here it's diametrically opposed, because it should really be only according to reason, and you're telling me, the Torah says, it should only be according to the goral, only according to this.
Well, it was the same thing.
What?
It was the same thing. The goral was already known.
Still doesn't make any sense. He hasn't said that yet, by the way. במאמר לאדמו"ר בעל צמח צדק, in a mimer from the tzemach tzedek, וכן במאמרים לרבותינו של האחריו, and Rebbe's afterwards, מדובר העניין של אך בגורל יחלק את הארץ, כפי שהוא בנפש ובעבודת השם. לפי המוסבר שמתורצת גם הקושיה האמורה. So in that mimer, he talks about how the goral works in the psyche, how it works in service of Hashem, and there he gives a teretz, he gives an answer to this question. גורל הוא הרי דבר הנעלה מטעם ודת, וחלוקת הארץ חייב להיות אמנם רק על פי גורל, משום שהחלוקה נובעת מעניין של למעלה מטעם ודת. So he says, it's true that, basically what he's saying is, my first supposition was wrong, that the division of the land, according to the affinity between the tribe and the parcel of land, is not the main consideration, but rather the main consideration is that it should be according to this random event. It should be above reason. So to explain this, we have to first of all introduce the following. למרות שכל יהודי חייב בכל המצוות, ישנם בכל זאת לכל יהודי עניינים מיוחדים השייכים אליו בפרט. It says, even though every Jew is chayav in mitzvahs, he is obligated to perform the commandments, still every Jew has a special affinity to certain mitzvahs. כפי שבתניא איגרת הקודש מסברת העובדה שאנו מוצאים בתנאים והאמוראים שהיו זהירים תפי במידה יתרה במצוות מסוימות. As we find in the Tanya, that every, even the Tanaim and Morim, each one of them was especially careful about a certain mitzvah. And they were careful about all the mitzvahs. But they were especially careful about certain issues, certain mitzvahs. Because these mitzvahs were particularly related to them. And all the other mitzvahs that they kept, that was influenced by their connection to this particular mitzvah. Meaning that this particular mitzvah gave strength for them to perform all the other mitzvot that they were obligated. שייכות העניינים המיוחדים לכל אחד אינה על פי טעם ודעת, על פי הבנת שכלו שיש לו קשר מיוחד לעניינים האלו, כי אם למעלה מטעם ודעת עניין הגורל. So he says the connection to that particular mitzvah in which you are especially careful is not according to reason. It's not that you come and you say, you're not supposed to ask the question, or so what am I particularly suited to? That's not how you find what you're especially careful about. Rather, it's something that happens above reason. You find that connection in the world somehow. And he'll now explain something about this. So here he says it. לפיכך, כשאדם רואה שיש לו לגבי מצווה מסוימת העליונות והסתרים במידה יתרה, משמש הדבר הוכחה כי יש למצווה זו שייכות יתרה אליו. When a person sees that the world is presenting difficulties with a particular mitzvah, so he should know that that's the sign that he's particularly related to that mitzvah. What he's saying is like this. By all the other mitzvot that a person does,
the sichah doesn't bother me if I want to do it.
No, it doesn't bother me the regular way. But when the world begins to say, it's not the Yetzer Hara, it's not me anymore. But I see that there's a certain reluctance in reality. There's opposition, there are hurdles that reality is putting upon me. That's how I know that this is where I will shine especially. This is where I will be connected especially. מעובדה זו עצמה שנערמים קשיים במידה כזו יש להוכיח שהדבר נוגע לו יותר. It's a very interesting way of thinking. It's saying that in general, you shouldn't live your life. He said this, the foundation of the mitzvahs is to have one mitzvah like this. The rest of the mitzvahs shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't come and say, look, I haven't gone to 100% tzedakah, so the world is making it really hard for me to give 80% of my money to tzedakah. That's weird thinking. The world's not making it particularly hard for you. It's just impossible to do that. So what are you talking about? A person comes and says, I'm a shaliach in Minnesota, and I can't get Badatz Eida Haredis. So now I'm going to have to starve until I do. What are you talking about? That's not... The world's not being particularly hard on you. It's just that you're living in a place where there is no such hechsher. You can't live on that. So you're going to have to change your ideas about kashrus. You're going to have to make do with local kashrus. What does this really mean? It means, this is really where it's... that I can't even do the basic. There's something in the world that doesn't let me even do, for instance, every single morning I want to come to davening on time, and no matter what I try to do, I'm always late. And then the person has to say, one time it's the alarm clock doesn't go off, one time it's this, one time it's that. Not me. I'm able to get up. But there's always some circumstances. There's a traffic jam, there's this, there's that. The world is saying to you, make an effort here, make a special effort here. Because you will shine, your whole countenance will shine if you're able to overcome these obstacles. What is this like? Also the same thing by the Torah, it says. The person wants to learn, and it's really, really tough on him. And he doesn't have a good mind. And so he gives up entirely. He says, okay, it's enough that I say Shema in the morning, I should say Shema in the evening. So there, the Torah itself says, don't give up. Because I understand that maybe this is not your main occupation in life. You don't have to be a rabbi. But, even though you don't have to be a rabbi, you should work on this. Because what you will do against the opposition of the way you are, the way the world is for you, and you'll be able to surmount that opposition, will cause you to shine in everything else that you do. So you have to look at these things irrationally in a certain sense. Like the world is not telling me, stay away. The world is telling me, look, there's a big treasure here. We don't give it to anyone. You have to show that you're committed. That's what the world is really saying. Even though he says, this is really not for me, I'm not very good at this thing. It's not it's not my usual wheelhouse. This is not where I usually work. This is not according to my talents. And he sees that this mitzvah is harder for him to perform than others. Or he sees that in certain type of learning of Torah, he has no geschmack and he has no success. He doesn't understand it fully. But on the contrary, this is the sign that this is what belongs to you especially. Again, this is only one mitzvah. It doesn't have, by the way, it could also change during the person's life. It's not necessarily true that it will be this way his whole life. And through it, if he's able to break this barrier, these obstacles, these barriers to success in this mitzvah, all his divine service, all his divine toil will rise to a new level. That's why there's opposition to this from the Yetzer, from the world, because it really is the key to the rest of his success. לפיכך, אין לו להניח עניין זה להתמסר לעניינים אחרים, כי אם אדרבה להשתדל דווקא בעשיית עניין זה, שכן הוא נוגע לו ביותר, עובדה זו עצמה שאין הוא מבין את הקשר אליו ואינו רואה שהדבר נוגע לו במיוחד, היא אחת העלמות וההסתרים. So again, on the contrary, he shouldn't forsake this, he shouldn't give up and go and commit himself to other things which are easier for him. He should be adamant, he should be very strong-willed to break this barrier and to manifest his connection to this particular act, to this particular mitzvah, not to give up on it. Now we can go back to the Goral. Now we can go back to how the land was divided. Section 9. כך יובן הנאמר, אך בגורל יחלק את הארץ, בגורל שהוא למעלה מטעם ודעת. This is how we should understand the division of the parcels of land based on the Goral, based on this raffle or lottery. לארץ ישראל היו חלקים מסוגים שונים, הר שפלה ועמק, שדה לבן, שדה פרדס וכו'. There were different types of parcels of land. There's a mountainous area, there's a flat area, there is a valley, there is land that's good for staples, there's land that's good for trees. החלוקה שפלוני קיבל בהר ופלוני בשפלה ובעמק, זה בשדה הברזל וזה בשדה הלבן, הייתה בהתאם למידת שייכותו הפרטית של כל אחד לארץ ישראל הרוחנית, שהתבטאה לכן בחלוקה כזו בארץ ישראל הגשמית. So the division of the parcels to the people was indeed according to their spiritual proclivity. משום כך, אך בגורל לחלק את הארץ, כי שייכותו של כל אחד לחלקו אינה שייכות לפי טעם ודת, כי מעניין שלמעלה מטעם ודת שדוגמתו למטה הוא עניין הגורל. So his connection to this had to be super rational. In the same way that the place that you're most connected to, you need to use super rational thinking, which is, even though it's difficult, even though it doesn't make any sense for me to work here, because this is not where my talents lie. This is not, on the contrary, this is where everything else is going to start from. Everything else should be according to reason. Everything else you should do according to what your mind says. You have to use your reason. But the beginning of the work, the linchpin of everything you're going to do is going to be this one thing where you are adamant even against the opposition and the barriers from nature. Even against your own nature. But you have to have, so here they had it easy in a certain sense. Because the Torah was telling them, look, you have a special affinity to this part of the country, but it's going to take work to discover it. So because this whole issue was revealed to us in this mimer from the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Torah is eternal, so and it, as the Baal Shem Tov used to say, it applies in every place and every time. So this is especially applicable to us. לכל אחד עניין מיוחד השייך לו בפרט, ולמרות העלמות וההסתרים שיש לו בעניין זה, ואדרבה, כאמור, מפני שהוא רואה שהיצר רע העולם עומד לנגדו, עליו להשתדל יותר ויותר לעשות אותו, כי העניין שייך לו במיוחד, ובאמצעותו תהיה המשכה ועלייה גם בשאר ענייניו. So, like we said, every person has to apply this in his own life, and be adamant and be and push harder exactly in that one place where he sees that there's opposition to him both from inside and outside. Now, we finished the sichos for Pinchas. We had 3. They are submission, separation, sweeping. Just to recap very quickly, the submission was that the only person in the world that could do the mitzvah that Pinchas did was Pinchas. Everybody else was silent. Why is this submission? Well, you could say, first of all, the fact that the rest of the world is not doing this is their submission, that they're waiting for it to be yours. But the other side of it is that Pinchas here had to submit. What did he have to submit? He had to submit his fear. He had a tremendous amount of fear that this wouldn't work out. So Hashem says, by your fear, I'm going to send even an angel to help you do this, even though it seems to you that you're not the right person. Right? Because who am I to go up against Zimri? Who am I to battle against? He was a warrior. He was 40, probably 50 years old. And he's a young guy, he's 18 or 19. How is he going to win against him, even though the guy's busy with this stuff? There was a real fear that Pinchas would be killed. So he says there's submission here. And the other side of the submission is that you're getting no support from the basement. Nobody's telling you this is the right thing to do, Pinchas. Go. Nobody's cheering you on. On the contrary, everybody's looking, not saying anything. And you don't know if you have support or not. That takes a lot of submission to go and do something in spite of the fact that I have no support. The separation was even more powerful here. Separation here was saying that when it comes to those things that are yours, how did you say it here? Last night it sat much better for me. The zealotry there has to be zealotry. Meaning, what is he saying? He's saying that, how do I know that I'm doing something that's really needed, something that is really required? He says you have to be like Pinchas in the sense that you're willing to completely put yourself aside. Meaning, I don't know how this will work out for me. So before we said this is submission, but here we're saying something higher in the second part. He's saying that if you have to ask a question, then this is not really related to you. You understand what I mean? This is different. Before, you were the one who saw the problem, you saw the solution, but nobody's supporting you. Here he's saying something else. If while you're doing something, you even have a question, it doesn't flow by itself. You have to go ask. Then you're not really passionate. You're not really zealous. And if that's the case, if you have to go ask, then that's not the right way to do this. There are certain things, and he says, especially when you're in the time of a plague, he says the plague could be physical, it could be spiritual. The fact that you have to go ask someone, that itself is a sign that this is not for you. So you have to act in a way that comes and says, look, for certain things, to save certain things, it has to be in a state that I just have to do. The action is the main thing here. And I can't hesitate at all.
It has to be free flow.
Okay? No hesitation. The third option he is giving here is that you do something and it's against all the odds, it's against everything in you even. There's a lot of hesitation. Everything's opposed to it. It says, but you have to get over it completely. You have to completely ignore this and do things do it above reason. So these are 3 different perspectives on what does it mean to do something that is difficult. It could be that you're doing it because there's no support. It's difficult because there's no support from you. It could be that you're hesitating. And the third option is that the world is not just not supporting you, it's not just that you have hesitation, it's actually against you. Against you. So he says like this, that submission is basically actually the easiest. If there's no support, you can still submit, you can still decide that I have to do this because I have the solution. When you have inner hesitation, that's more difficult. You have to muster yourself. You have to muster your strength from somewhere higher, your higher identity, that's what we call it. And you have to say that even though I hesitate, my higher identity has to flow, that's my divine soul, and it will now make things happen by themselves, as it were. It's, like I said, it's like free flow state. Like I can't think about asking even. I have to actually go into it. It's a type of self-sacrifice, but it goes by ignoring the fact that I internally hesitate. That's a separation. Separation means finding my higher self, where there is no, by the way, in each of them, the moment that you do it once, you can do it again. So if you've learned how to act without support, you'll be able to do, in one thing, you'll be able to do it in other things as well. If you've learned how to exercise your divine soul in one area, it'll give you certainty and the lack of hesitation in all other areas. The biggest problem that people have is self-doubt. So he says, if you find that mitzvah where you can muster your higher self, your divine soul, in order to perform that mitzvah, it will project certainty on everything else you do in life. And the final one, which is the sweetening, he says, sweetening is always above reason, is that sometimes it's not just that you're hesitating, it's not just that there's no support, there's actually opposition. But it's a mitzvah, you have to do it. Here he's not bringing anything, he's not saying it's like going to do what Pinchas did. It could be a simple mitzvah, like getting to shul on time. So when there's opposition from everything, you have to go beyond reason and say, even though it looks like the universe is telling me, Hashem is telling me, I'm telling me this is not for you, you have to go beyond the reason. Overcome that reason and succeed. And when you succeed, that again is the basis for everything else that you'll do. So these three examples that he brought are three examples of overcoming obstacles in performing a mitzvah and how they correspond to mission, separation, and sweetening, and how they affect the rest of your being. That they really, he only said it in the last one, but it's true about the first two also. The moment you do it in one place, it becomes possible to do this everywhere else. So tomorrow we will start Matot.